The other pilots whispered behind her back. "Rodriguez can barely reach the pedals." But when enemy armor rolled toward defenseless civilians in the valley below, Captain Maya Rodriguez was about to show them that the deadliest Apache pilots aren't the biggest, they're the ones who refuse to let innocent people die. Meet Captain Maya Rodriguez, 28 years old, barely 5 feet 2 inches tall, with dark brown eyes that burned with determination, and small hands that controlled $64 million worth of the world's most advanced attack helicopter. For 3 years, she had flown AH-64 Apache longbows for the 1st Battalion, but to most of her squadron, she was still the pilot who needed seat cushions to reach the controls properly. Maya's journey to the Apache cockpit had been marked by constant doubt from instructors who couldn't separate her physical size from her flying ability. During flight school, she had consistently scored perfect marks on technical evaluations, while enduring whispers about whether someone her size could handle the physical demands of combat flying. The Apache helicopter was designed for pilots with specific physical requirements. The controls demanded reach and strength that assumed average male proportions. The aircraft's weapon systems required coordination that most instructors believed smaller pilots couldn't achieve under combat stress. Maya had proven them wrong repeatedly. But institutional bias ran deeper than individual performance. Her background explained her relentless drive to excel despite physical limitations. The daughter of Sergeant Major Carlos Rodriguez, a decorated Army Ranger who had been killed in action when Maya was 14, she had grown up believing that determination could overcome any obstacle that genetics presented. "Mija," her father had told her during their last conversation before his final deployment, "people will always tell you what you can't do because of how you look. Your job is to prove them wrong by doing it better than anyone thought possible." Carlos Rodriguez had been one of the Army's smallest Rangers, standing 5 feet 6 inches in a profession dominated by larger men. But his tactical intelligence and refusal to quit had made him legendary among special operations units. He had taught Maya that physical limitations were only obstacles when you accepted them as permanent. Maya's Apache training had been conducted under constant scrutiny from instructors who expected her to fail. She had to demonstrate proficiency in flight maneuvers, weapons employment, and emergency procedures while proving that her size wouldn't compromise mission effectiveness. "Rodriguez has exceptional technical skills," one instructor had written in an evaluation, "but Apache combat operations require physical capabilities that may exceed what smaller pilots can sustain during extended engagements. Recommend assignment to transport or reconnaissance roles." Maya had ignored every suggestion to transfer to aircraft that were more appropriate for her physical stature. She had studied Apache systems with obsessive dedication, mastering technical details that other pilots considered excessive. If she couldn't match their physical advantages, she would exceed their knowledge and preparation. During her first combat deployment, Maya's flying performance had been flawless, while her squadron mates continued questioning whether she belonged in an attack helicopter. She flew with precise technique that compensated for physical limitations through superior planning and execution. Her weapons accuracy was exceptional, consistently achieving hit rates that exceeded squadron averages. Her tactical awareness was equally impressive, identifying threats and opportunities that other pilots missed. But none of her achievements seemed to change perceptions about her suitability for combat aviation. Lieutenant Colonel James Hawk Mitchell embodied the institutional skepticism that Maya faced throughout her career. At 46 years old, with 22 years of Apache experience, he commanded the 1st Battalion with traditional beliefs about physical requirements for attack helicopter operations. Mitchell respected Maya's technical proficiency but questioned whether she could perform under the physical stress of sustained combat operations. Apache missions required pilots to fly for hours while operating complex weapon systems under conditions that challenged human endurance limits. "Rodriguez is technically sound," he would tell other officers during briefings, "but Apache combat is different from training exercises. When you're taking ground fire while engaging multiple targets, you need someone with the physical presence to handle the aircraft under extreme stress." Mitchell's concerns weren't entirely unfounded. Apache helicopters were demanding aircraft that required significant physical input during combat maneuvering. The weapon systems demanded coordination between multiple limbs, while flying tactical profiles that subjected pilots to substantial G-forces. But Mitchell's focus on physical requirements blinded him to Maya's exceptional situational awareness and tactical innovation. Her smaller stature actually provided advantages in aircraft visibility and endurance that larger pilots couldn't match. She could fly for longer periods without fatigue, because she required less physical space and energy. The mission that would validate Maya's capabilities began with intelligence reports indicating a massive refugee crisis in the contested border region. Thousands of civilians were fleeing ethnic violence, creating humanitarian corridors that enemy forces were targeting for propaganda victories. The refugee evacuation involved over 5,000 civilians, including women, children, and elderly people who couldn't defend themselves against military attacks. Intelligence indicated that enemy armored units were positioning themselves to intercept refugee columns at strategic crossing points. Enemy commanders had identified the refugee crisis as an opportunity to demonstrate their power while creating international incidents that would complicate coalition operations. They had deployed their most advanced armored units to conduct what they described as security operations, but were actually planned massacres. The tactical situation presented nightmare scenarios for helicopter operations. Enemy armor was positioned in terrain that provided natural defensive advantages while limiting approach routes for attacking aircraft. Surface-to-air missile systems provided additional layers of protection that made conventional attack profiles extremely dangerous. Maya's squadron was assigned to provide close air support for refugee protection operations, with specific instructions to avoid engagement unless civilians were under direct attack. The mission parameters emphasized force protection over aggressive intervention, reflecting institutional priorities that valued aircraft preservation. Rodriguez, you will maintain overwatch position at maximum standoff range, Mitchell briefed during the pre-mission planning. Do not engage unless refugees are taking casualties. Do not descend below minimum safe altitude. Your primary mission is reconnaissance and reporting. Maya studied the intelligence photos with growing concern. Enemy armor positioning indicated planned attacks rather than defensive operations. Tank formations were positioned to maximize civilian casualties while creating propaganda opportunities that would terrorize other refugee populations. Sir, Maya said carefully, the enemy positioning suggests coordinated attacks against civilian targets. If we maintain defensive postures, we'll be documenting massacres instead of preventing them. Mitchell's response reflected institutional thinking that prioritized aircraft survival over aggressive intervention. Rodriguez, your job is to observe and report. Let higher command make tactical decisions about engagement. Follow procedures and bring your aircraft home intact. The refugee evacuation began at dawn, with Maya's Apache providing high-altitude reconnaissance over the crossing point, where 5,000 civilians would be most vulnerable to armored attack. Initial stages proceeded quietly, with no enemy movement detected by her advanced sensors. At 0830, Maya's threat warning systems began detecting multiple armored vehicles moving toward the refugee crossing from concealed positions. Her thermal imaging revealed 15 T-72 main battle tanks emerging from camouflaged locations simultaneously. Hawk Base, this is Storm 1, Maya transmitted to Mitchell's command post. I have 15 enemy tanks moving toward the refugee crossing. Civilians are completely exposed and defenseless. Mitchell's response came immediately with the caution that Maya had expected. Storm 1. Maintain observation. Do not engage unless refugees are taking direct fire. Higher command is coordinating response options. Maya watched through her targeting system as enemy tanks positioned themselves for coordinated attack against civilians who had no idea they were walking into a carefully planned killing zone. Men, women, children, and elderly refugees were moving across open ground where tank fire would create devastating casualties. The first enemy tank fired at 0845, its main gun round impacting directly among a group of civilian families. Maya could see bodies scattered across the crossing point, while surviving refugees ran in panic toward cover that didn't exist. Hawk Base. Civilians are taking casualties. Maya transmitted with urgency that reflected the horror she was witnessing. Request immediate clearance to engage. Mitchell's response carried the institutional caution that had dominated Maya's entire career. Storm 1. Higher command is still coordinating response. Maintain current position and continue observation. Maya looked at her weapon systems display, seeing 30 Hellfire missiles and 1,230mm cannon rounds that could stop the massacre happening below her. 5,000 innocent people were about to die while she watched from a safe distance because procedures mattered more than human lives. Her father's voice echoed in her memory from their last conversation. Your job is to prove them wrong by doing it better than anyone thought possible. Maya made the decision that would either save 5,000 lives or end her military career, She armed her weapon systems and began her descent toward the enemy armor that was systematically murdering defenseless civilians. "Storm 1, you are not cleared to engage," Mitchell screamed through the radio. "Return to observation altitude immediately." Maya's response carried 3 years of frustration with commanders who prioritized procedures over results. "Sir, 5,000 people are being massacred. I'm stopping it now." What followed was the most devastating anti-armor engagement in Apache helicopter history. Maya descended into the kill zone and began systematically destroying enemy tanks with precision that redefined what one attack helicopter could accomplish against overwhelming ground forces. Her first Hellfire missile struck the lead enemy tank at 0847, eliminating the commander who was coordinating the massacre. The explosion created confusion among the remaining tank crews, who hadn't anticipated facing air attack during their planned slaughter. Maya's second and third missiles destroyed 2 tanks that were firing directly into refugee crowds. Her targeting was so precise that she could eliminate armored vehicles while minimizing risk to civilians who were scattered throughout the engagement area. "Impossible!" screamed one enemy tank commander over intercepted radio frequencies. "Where did this helicopter come from?" Maya's 4th through 7th Hellfire strikes came in rapid succession as she maneuvered her Apache through defensive positions that should have been impregnable to helicopter attack. Her small stature allowed her to fly profiles that larger pilots couldn't sustain, using terrain masking that provided concealment while maintaining weapons effectiveness. The psychological impact of her attack was as devastating as the kinetic effects. Enemy tank crews who had been confident about massacring defenseless civilians suddenly found themselves being systematically destroyed by someone who flew with precision they couldn't counter. Maya's 8th and 9th missiles eliminated tanks that were attempting to withdraw from the engagement area. She had no intention of allowing any enemy armor to survive and potentially threaten other refugee populations. Every tank that escaped meant future civilian casualties. By 0850, Maya had destroyed 9 enemy tanks while the remaining 6 were maneuvering frantically to avoid her continued attacks. But she wasn't finished. Refugee evacuation was still in progress, and enemy armor still posed threats to civilian populations. Her 10th through 13th Hellfire missiles struck enemy tanks that were attempting to establish defensive positions in terrain that provided natural cover. Maya's tactical awareness allowed her to predict their movement patterns and intercept them with devastating accuracy. "She's destroying our entire battalion," screamed another enemy commander. "How is one helicopter doing this to us?" Maya's 14th and 15th missile strikes eliminated the last 2 operational enemy tanks at 0853. 8 minutes after the engagement began, 15 enemy tanks had been destroyed and the refugee crossing was secure from armored attack. "Storm 1, report status?" Mitchell's voice carried amazement and professional concern in equal measure. Maya conducted post-engagement assessment while continuing to provide overwatch for the refugee evacuation that was now proceeding safely. Hawk Base, 15 enemy tanks destroyed. Refugee crossing is secure. Continuing mission as assigned. The silence that followed lasted almost 45 seconds before Mitchell's voice returned, filled with respect and institutional confusion. "Storm 1. Outstanding performance. You just accomplished what an entire armored battalion couldn't achieve." Maya's weapons expenditure report showed that she had fired 15 Hellfire missiles with perfect accuracy while using her cannon to suppress enemy infantry positions that had been supporting the tank attack. Her tactical employment had been flawless, despite violating every procedural limitation that had been placed on her mission. The refugee evacuation continued for 6 more hours, with Maya providing continuous overwatch from an Apache that had single-handedly eliminated the primary threat to civilian safety. 5,000 people crossed to safety because she had been willing to risk everything to protect them. When Maya returned to base that evening, she found Mitchell waiting with an expression that mixed professional pride with personal revelation. "Rodriguez, what you accomplished today was extraordinary. You didn't just destroy 15 tanks, you saved 5,000 lives by refusing to let procedures trump human decency." Maya climbed out of her Apache, revealing flight gear damp with sweat and brown eyes bright with the satisfaction of mission accomplished. "Sir, I just did what needed to be done. Size doesn't matter when innocent people are dying and you have the weapons to stop it." Mitchell nodded slowly, understanding that Maya's success hadn't been despite her physical limitations, but because of her determination to overcome every obstacle that others used to define her capabilities. The after-action reports from Maya's engagement became case studies examined by attack helicopter units worldwide. Her tactics were analyzed, her techniques were incorporated into anti-armor training programs, and her mission became the foundation for new doctrine about helicopter employment in urban warfare. 6 months later, Captain Maya Rodriguez was promoted to major and offered assignment to the Army's most elite Apache units. But more importantly, she never again heard anyone suggest that smaller pilots couldn't handle the physical demands of attack helicopter operations. Mitchell became her strongest advocate, frequently telling other commanders, "Rodriguez taught us that physical presence isn't as important as mental toughness and tactical precision." Her size wasn't a limitation, it was an advantage that allowed her to fly profiles that larger pilots couldn't sustain. Today, Lieutenant Colonel Maya Storm Rodriguez runs the Army's premier Apache training program, teaching advanced tactics that combine precision weapons employment with innovative flight techniques. Her students learn not just how to operate attack helicopters, but how to think beyond physical limitations when missions require unprecedented solutions. Maya's philosophy, validated through impossible success against impossible odds, has become the foundation of modern attack helicopter training. Physical size determines how you fit in the cockpit, mental size determines how you perform in combat. Her program emphasizes tactical innovation, precision weapons employment, and systematic approaches to anti-armor operations that challenge traditional assumptions about pilot requirements. Students learn that the most important capability isn't physical strength, it's the determination to protect innocent people regardless of personal risk. Have you ever been told you weren't big enough, strong enough, or tough enough for something important, only to discover that heart and skill matter more than physical measurements? Maya's story reminds us that the most dangerous limitations are often the ones we accept about ourselves based on other people's expectations. The squadron that whispered about her size learned that the deadliest Apache pilots aren't always the biggest. They're the ones who refuse to let innocent people die while they watch from safety. Sometimes the most devastating weapons are operated by the smallest hands, when those hands belong to warriors with the biggest hearts. If you believe that determination can overcome any physical limitation, and that protecting others matters more than following procedures, share this story. Because somewhere, someone is being told they're too small for their dreams, not knowing that size is measured by courage rather than inches. Maya Rodriguez didn't just destroy 15 enemy tanks in 8 minutes. She proved that the most underestimated warriors often become the most unstoppable when innocent lives depend on someone willing to fight harder than anyone thought possible. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, you can subscribe to see more incredible stories like this.